Hey everybody, Pastor Tim here. We're in week 2 in our study of The Treasure Principle by Randy Alcorn. I'm going to share some thoughts with you, ask some questions of you to consider for yourself, and maybe if you're meeting up with somebody else to discuss with that person. Chapter 2, I love this chapter so much because if I were to summarize it, I would say the real theme is context is king, because the whole idea behind the chapter is, was Jesus really talking about financial giving? Was he talking about giving in a more spiritual way? Was he talking about giving of our love and our efforts? Yes, Jesus talks about giving in a variety of ways, but in particular in Matthew chapter 6 and in various other places, I would dare say a lot of other places in Scripture, Jesus and other New Testament writers, they tell us about giving financially. So I just want to start off with acknowledging that it can be easy for us to kind of spiritualize everything that Jesus says. But again, I want to point out the spiritual and the physical are connected. Jesus was physically resurrected. Jesus ate food after the resurrection. If his body was just left in the grave and just his spirit came back, that was a possibility for how God could have set it up, but he didn't. Jesus was physically resurrected. He was a physical being. So this matters because money that we use to bless people or to buy resources with, to be a blessing to others or to take care of our needs, that's a physical thing. Yes, there are spiritual aspects that are non-material to our life, but it's both, not just one or the other. It's both and. And so Randy Alcorn added this chapter because people said, well, was Jesus really talking about financial giving? I could go through the whole summary of, breaking down the scriptures that he went into in this passage, but let me just draw out a couple key points and throw out some questions, okay? So number one is that Jesus talks about storing treasure in heaven, and some people can spiritualize that and say, well, heaven is a spiritual place, not a physical place. If you are around for our heaven series, we talked about the reality that heaven is a physical place. There will be physical activities. There will be a physical reality there. I think part of the deeper thing going on there is people don't want to give up their physical treasure, right? I like my stuff. I like my money. It makes me feel happy. It makes me feel like I have control. And so Jesus is pushing back at that. And he's basically saying, who's ultimately in control here? Are you in control? Am I in control? Is your money in control of you? Does it give you a sense that everything will be safe because you have a lot of it? And the way he kind of presses us is to say, if you were to say to him, Jesus, I'm not concerned about money. I know that you're ultimately in charge. He would say, okay, well then just prove it by being generous with your money. So there's a deeper challenge for us to ask the question, where do we find our safety and where do we find our control? Is it connected to our bank accounts? And I would even go so far as to say, how connected is it to our bank accounts? Because for all of us, we like to have some sense of control, but how much control do we need? And have we gone to the point of saying, because of my big bank account and the resources I have, now I know I'm safe? He talks about the passage where God says, you fool, to this rich man, you fool, like your life's going to be required of you tonight. So he had all these things stored up, but he didn't have his soul ultimately taken care of. All right, so let's ask the question, number one, how do we feel like we deal with or wrestle with the idea of control or safety, and how is that connected to our money? Just spend some time thinking about, do I feel more or less safe / in control when I have more money? There's a question for us to consider. Now, going on, he talks about a variety of different passages in Scripture that point to the fact that he's clearly talking about money. I love the fact that he cites that passage in the Gospel of Luke where the rich young ruler, who's identified as rich, comes to him and he says, Jesus, I've done all the right things. What do I need to do to enter the kingdom of heaven? Jesus says, one thing you have to do, sell everything you have, give it to the poor, and you'll have treasure in heaven. And that's a call to literally take your wealth and to sell it and to give the money to the poor, not theoretically, not spiritualizing it. Do that, and there will be a reward in heaven. Right there, we can see the concept that how we handle our money results in reward in heaven. Now, in future chapters, he's going to talk about the joy of giving. That's really what he jumps into in the next chapter. So we have to wrestle again with the question, do we really believe that if we use our money well, it will result in a greater long-term good for us? Now, here's an interesting passage to think about. The book of James talks about the fact that people can come and say, hey, I have need. And if we're like, oh, just be blessed, then it's not true love. It's not really living as Christ would call us to live. So what are we learning there? It's not enough just to have good intentions. We have to do something, right? Yes, I want to have good intentions, but it doesn't end there. And if we have truly heart and soul level good intentions, it will lead us toward external action. James says if someone shows up at your house for a need and you say, oh, blessings to you, he says you're not really loving them. And so in the same way, if there's a need in front of us, we are called to engage with that need. Now we have to do some wrestling with the idea of we can't meet every need every second in the entire world. That's not a reality. But let us not create an excuse and say, because I can't meet every need, I meet no needs. Because I can't solve all pain in the world, I try to resolve or help, nobody who might be in pain. I want to end here from chapter 2, page 20. Alcorn says, as we've seen, there's overwhelming interpretive evidence as to the meaning of Matthew 6, verses 19 to 21, not just in its immediate context, which we love, context is king, but also in the parallel passages in Matthew 19, Mark 10, Luke 12, and 1 Timothy 6. Together they confirm that storing up treasures in heaven means giving generously to kingdom causes and receiving God's reward for doing so. So I want to press us with my one final question back to this core thing, which is, if we don't fully believe in heaven and rewards in heaven, we will live differently here on earth. We'll try to hoard things and keep things and hold on to things as opposed to being generous with things. I've got so many questions I want to throw out for us to think about now, but I want to kind of pace us as we go through the rest of the book. So I hope chapter 2 was clarifying for you. If you had some questions or doubt about, is this a spiritual thing or is this literally giving material wealth? It's very clear from scripture. It is giving our material wealth and items to be a blessing to others. And we bless them now, help them now, and we receive a reward in heaven. All right, that's chapter 2. We'll see you next week for chapter 3. Take care.